1 second. Now.
Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me. It's very nice to see you when it's a bit,
Hello.
sitting
It's
here
lovely to see you all.
inside.
We're all a
But
bit
at the same
cooped up
time,
at
it's a very
present,
serious situation
but
in
it's of
all of our
course a very
countries,
serious
and
situation
we
that we're
all
in.
feel, we
I'm
all of
sure
us
we
know
all know
somebody who
somebody
has
who's fallen
lost
ill to
somebody, or
COVID,
who has
has lost
who
someone
has
to
themselves
COVID, or maybe you
been ill.
yourselves
Many
have
people
lost someone
have lost their
to
work.
COVID, and of
Many
course
kids
our
cannot go to
children
school,
can't
so
go
it's
to
a very,
school.
very heavy,
Maybe
very,
you're
very difficult
homeschooling.
time
These are
here
very,
in
very
Sweden.
difficult times.
Well, we hope for light
Here
at
in
the end of the tunnel,
Sweden,
but we
well,
are not ready for that as yet.
hoping
We
that
are
the
very worried about
situation
the
will
third
improve
wave now. We have
slightly
a social
soon, but of
democratic
course,
government,
we can't
and they
take
work
anything
together
for
with the
granted.
environmental party in Sweden, and they again
Now,
also work with two
here
other
we
parties on the right
see a
side.
coalition
On the
government
last time
negotiating.
we worked with them, but now it's the Center Party and the Liberal
What we
Party.
can say is
And
that
the
the
cooperation which we have
cooperation
now
that
is
we're
an old
seeing
dream
now
for the Social
is an old
Democrats
dream
and
for
the
the
Prime Minister,
Social
that he's
Democratic
been able to
Prime
work with these
Minister.
two parties. They have
It
to have
really ran
a
whole through the
very
Conservative
clear
parties,
new
so.
liberal politics now. They have known about that from the very beginning. The Social
But
Democrats,
of course, in order to do
that
that,
was
they've had
the
to adopt a
only
much
possibility
more
for them when they
liberal
wanted
economic policy, and
not to
they
work
were
together
ready
with the
to
Swedish
do that.
Democrats. But this
The Social
government in
Democrats.
Sweden has now
And this has been the government that's been in
power
charge
during
during
COVID. We have quite a lot of people who have lost their jobs.
And what we've
Many
seen
people
is
who are a long time
unemployment.
out of
We
work
have
now.
the highest
The
levels of
highest since we
long-term
started
unemployment
to
for
measure, actually.
decades.
175,000 people have been out of work for 1 year
for
or
a
more
whole
now.
year or longer.
Sweden,
And here in
well, in Sweden, it's so that if you do not get that
you
much money for the
been
state,
unemployed
if
for a
you
long time,
do
if
not
you're
have a job
long-term
for
unemployed, that
1
means
year or more,
that you
and you have to take part in some
lower and
activities
lower
also,
social
and
benefits,
the longer time you do not have a job, the less money you
those
will get from the
benefits
state.
decrease over
So it is
time,
a
and
difficult for many
it's
people.
a
You have
tough time to be unemployed
450,000
as
people
well.
who are out of work. You had many people who
And
were
we
out of
had
work more than 1 year
very
even
large
before,
long-term
which
unemployed
had to do
population even
with
before this
the fact that they
crisis.
had a short education. Many people
Now,
from other
some
countries
of
came
them,
to
for
Sweden who didn't
example,
have the
don't have the right
necessary
education.
etc. But
Some
now we see that we
came
have
to
many
Sweden
people who have been
later in
out of work for a
life
very
and
long
found it
time.
difficult to
And we
join
are
the
very
labor
worried
market. But
that
what we
this
see
will
now is
continue
a
for a
rising
long time,
concern that this
that
long-term
this will be so for many years
unemployment
to come,
go
because the longer you are
entrenched.
out of work,
Because of course, the
the more
longer you're
difficult it is
unemployed,
to
the harder it
find a
is
job.
to join
In
the labor
Sweden,
market.
we have done quite a lot in
Now, in
order to
Sweden, we've
meet
tried to implement measures to
the COVID situation.
counter
First, I
COVID.
would like to
We've
talk
had
about the
some
economical things
economic
we have.
measures, of course.
And
We have relief packages,
it is
350 billion
150,000
Swedish
kronor.
kroners. Most of them have gone to companies
People do
and
not
paying furlough, which means that people are maybe working part-time, but they are receiving most of their usual pay. And there are also increased loan opportunities, but there's also direct aid. For example, for leasing benefits, and then there are also other types of compensation for lost income, because it's a very difficult time for many people. Now, I think we're up to 17 budgets in addition to our regular budget, so there has been a lot of budgeting. But we're also trying to see whether we can increase unemployment pay, and we managed to push that through. We've also managed to extend periods during which people can be a part of the unemployment security funds. And we've found that people who are in a very precarious position, and of course they should perhaps have needed more protection, because if you're in a very precarious economic position, it's hard to stay home if you have any symptoms, even if you perhaps should have. And what we are trying to ensure now is that, for example, companies that are based in tax havens should not access all the state aid that's been available, that we should prioritize small companies. On the left says that the companies, for example, once they restabilize after the crisis, then we should perhaps increase taxes so that we can reinstate some of that public funding. And we, of course, also need our scientists to also determine what kind of measures we'll need. It shouldn't only be up to the politicians. We need guidance from experts. And we can also say that Sweden has been quite alone in the strategy it chose up until summer. And some parties are now um, advocating for political measures to limit the spread of the disease, even though there perhaps isn't that much research backing up about that. And at the beginning of the crisis, there was a lot of cooperation between the parties, and that has died down a little bit over time. We've had a lot of deaths in Sweden, most of them among the elderly in elderly care, and we have not succeeded. We have failed. We have failed our elderly. And all the efforts were focused on trying to save the elderly, but because our elder care has been subfinanced for a long time, we have a lot of people who are part-time employed, they are short-time employed, they are on fixed-time employment in that sector. And so you, of course, have maybe not 12 people working at an elderly care home, but 25 when you could have had 12, and you have a lot of temp workers. And that, of course, increases the risk of a spread of a disease. So we've had a lot of infections in our elderly care homes, and it seems to be growing again now, sadly. So that is the current situation. We hope that this will be an eye-opener for many. We need to invest more in welfare and elderly care. We need to make sure that we also take political measures that give it a little bit more control, because a lot of elderly care, social care is now in the hands of private companies. Um, and because of that, we need to come up with measures to, of course, still increase standards for public services. Now, in Sweden, we haven't closed schools very much. Mostly upper secondary schools have been closed at certain times. And I think that is reasonable because the children are very hard hit when they miss out on school. And we're going to have to work very, very hard to recover the time lost, because, of course, even though children have been in schools, they've had to miss out when they had a symptom, and then they had to stay home, even if it was just a cold. Teachers have been ill. There have been a lot of temporary temps working in the sector, so it's been very hard. We've also seen children falling ill because of the whole situation. Save the Children has raised an alarm, but I just wanted to give you an overview, and I think I will leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you for a very interesting program. This is Mikkel. She is very often together with me at these meetings. She's here today as well with me. I would be quite short, but it is quite a lot of things to talk about in the political situation, because in the world as such, and also in each country. In Denmark, we are a bit after Sweden. We are coming after Sweden now. But we have had another strategy for the coronavirus than in Sweden. If we look at the schools, for instance, in Sweden, the schools have been open. We have here in Denmark had a very, very long time where the schools have been closed. Now the small kids from class 0 to class 4 will come back on Monday to school, but all of the other schools are closed. Everything is closed. At all levels are closed. So also quite a lot in the state is now closed down, and of course people are working from home mainly. We have also had not too many people dying. If we compare with other countries, we can see that we have had not that many people die, but of course it's a big problem for the economy, and it's also a problem for people how they fare. Also mainly for young people, also for people who have problems. It is very bad for young people and for kids to be away from their friends for such a long time. We can see that teachers and other specialists say that is so. We can also say that some people who have problems, social problems, they have also much larger problems now, and many more women now come to the crisis centers because we can see that violence in the homes is now a big problem. We can see that people also, we had in Copenhagen, people who live on the streets and they've been ill. It is very difficult for them to survive, of course. We also have people with psychical problems because to keep a society closed for such a long time means quite a lot. It has large consequences. Our health care system, it is working more or less, of course. The people who work in the healthcare sector, they're under a large pressure, but we have kept the situation quite good. Of course, quite a lot of people have died. I mean, people living in homes for the old people, but not that many. So of course it will cost something, whatever strategy you choose. So we will discuss this afterwards, what strategy was the best, because it is not sure. It's not sure what was the best to do. What you did in Sweden, what we did in Denmark, but at least not that many people have died. Maybe we will pay a price for people who will have mental problems afterwards. It's very difficult to say that right now. Then we have some economical problems or challenges. Of course, the whole world has got economical challenges. Those people who do not make much money when they work, they have, of course, quite a lot of problems now. We can see that also in our countries. We see this, that we have a class society here in our countries, and this you can see now, where our social democratic government has chosen a very different economic policy than before in Denmark, and we had before in Denmark. This is positive in many ways because people have got compensation. Both people have got compensation when they didn't get salaries, but also companies have got compensations. We have had to borrow quite a lot of money. This has also meant that we have not that many companies have gone bankrupt, and not that many people have been laid off. So we saw this also in the autumn last year, actually. That was positive. But of course, again, it is those who are living on the bottom of society, so to speak, they will also have the largest economical problems. Then we have both from our party and from other parties on the left side, we have said that we want to be sure that the social democratic party will have a policy which goes in the right direction, and I think that we have been able to do that also. But we have to do as much as we can so that people will get compensation for those who are out of work now. Because we have a system where you do not get money forever, of course. Now we have to think about this again. We have in Sweden discussed quite a lot of different packets for companies who are offshore companies even. We have not won this so far, but of course the money have been used to stimulate Danish economy. I mean, used for small companies and middle companies. These money have to go to the people who have the lowest salaries. Those who have a low salary and had that before, it is best to give them the money and not give that to large companies which are not in Denmark but offshore. So we are in a situation now, the parties on the left-hand side, we have a social democratic government, which of course, it goes more or less in the right direction. It invests in the welfare society, even though we have an economic crisis now. They do that, and of course, they have not sent the bill to people who didn't have that much money, didn't have that money. But of course, this means that it will be more and more difficult for us to pressure the party to have an even more progressive left policy. We could do quite a lot more than we have done, also in order to make it possible for people who now are living during this crisis to have a better situation. This is a challenge for us on the left-hand side, and I think, and I'm quite sure actually, that many of us will. It is much easier to be on the left-hand side when the Social Democratic Party does everything wrong. It's much easier to tell them what the alternative is. But when the Social Democratic Party does quite a lot of right things, it is also more difficult for us. And I would like to, we would like to have to of course, to work also with this, but this is a challenge for us. And I would like to say a few words about the climate policy, because before the corona epidemics, we had introduced a new law on the climate, one of the most progressive laws in the whole world. The Finns have an even more progressive policy, I think, in this field. But we have a very progressive law. We wanted to, in 2030, have a reduction of 70%. Of course, we have had problems with Corona because the political processes stop. We cannot focus on other things. Those who came out onto the streets and talked about climate cannot do that now. They cannot go out onto the street now. So it is difficult for people, but it is quite clear that the Social Democratic Party is not very, do not like the green policy now, especially when we are going to make that into policy, not only have it on paper. It is difficult now that because people cannot go out into the streets and protest and say what they think about the climate. And I think that was all I wanted to say. Thank you. Thank you. Danish politics in these times.
Okay. Thank you very much, Pernille. Danish politics has shifted in recent years. The Conservatives are undergoing a very large internal restructuring. We're seeing major internal shifts there, both in terms of party politics, but also in personality politics. And so there's a real shift in the balance of power, the internal balance of power on the right wing at present. And in Denmark, we have a social democratic government, and it's held a very steady course, which of course means that things go well for them. But at the same time, the Red-Green Alliance and SF, Socialistisk Folkeparti, are also holding their share of the voters at present. So it is really quite remarkable that even though things are going very well for the Social Democrats, we are still very strong as well. And then we have a party called the Alternative, which is a more militant Green party, and it has practically dissolved recently. But all in all, the center left in Denmark is historically strong at the moment. And it's not just because of the disarray on the right. It's also because we have a social democratic government that is daring to implement a social democratic economic policy. And because the Red-Green Alliance and the Socialist Party as well are working with the Social Democrats on those policies. So, and this is also unheard of, that we manage to really cooperate that broadly on the left. So the center left can be a credible government in Denmark. That's what we're learning now. This is what people are learning. And this has really just been reinforced during this crisis. And I think that is very positive. That's the silver lining here. And then one thing that we're seeing very clearly in Danish politics is that we've had a lot of unity around our COVID policies across the spectrum, far right to far left, broadly. In most cases, everybody has agreed. We've had certain exceptions, of course, but broadly we've agreed on the crisis policies that have been implemented, and we've managed to maintain that political unity. And I don't know whether that perhaps differs from the other Nordic countries. And as Pernille said, for us, it's been a priority to look at what happens with those on unemployment and those who are receiving contanthjälp, so long-term unemployment benefits. And we're trying really to retain that focus on making sure that we get everyone through this crisis, also the weakest. Now, I've said that we've had a lot of unity on our COVID policies in Denmark, but at the same time, we managed to also stay quite united on our green policies. And so the Red Green Alliance is always trying to sort of keep the Social Democrats, hold them to their climate promises and their green policies. And so that has also been very positive. And we've managed to get also some unity across the political spectrum there on green policies, environmental policies, climate policies, not on everything, but on some things. And that has been positive. Of course, there have been some frictions around agriculture, and that is to be expected. But for example, last week, all parties, except the most extreme fringes, so the most militant green activists left over from the alternative and the most militant right-wing activists, we have managed to get broad political agreement on a great investment in the North Sea. That's where we've been, drilling for oil for decades. But now we're going to turn that into an example for the rest of the world of how we can counter this climate crisis with wind turbines. I mean, we were the first country in the world to erect a wind turbine at sea. And now we're going to build a whole artificial island. And from that island, we're going to collect energies for 650 wind turbines, and they're going to send them over to the European mainland. So it's a huge investment, but it's an investment that will provide electricity for 10 million households. It's an investment of 210 billion Danish kroners over the coming years. This will benefit employment, it will benefit our energy policy, it will benefit Denmark. So, who would have thought that you could build an artificial island in the sea? It's possible. And we're showing that, we're demonstrating that. This new project will increase Denmark's wind energy six-fold. We're multiplying what we already have by 6. And the good thing is that SF, and the Red Green Alliance are very constantly, we're there nagging the Social Democrats all the time, pushing them to defend the climate, to do more, to go green, which is fantastic. And people can see that, in public opinion, people can see that we're pushing the Social Democrats in the right direction. So I really, I feel very hopeful that we're working together on the left. And I hope Pernille agrees with me on this.
Thank you very much, Mia. It's very nice to have possible to have a Nordic meeting again. We are looking forward to meet also in another way, not only like this. It is a very sad time now. The borders have been closed between our countries. The situation is, well, we look forward to finishing this situation when it's over. It is right what Mia says. Norway has had, when it comes to the pandemic, in comparison with most of the other countries, we have very, very low numbers of dead people, very, very low numbers of people who have gotten the disease. But we have had a strategy where we have had lockdown, which was quite hard. So it has many people have paid a high price for this also. We have had several lockdowns actually, and also some very, very large economical consequences. And in Norway, it has been like in other countries. We have not had that much political debate about the strategy we have chosen when it comes to work with the pandemic, when it comes to health and protect people against getting the disease. The political problems have been around the economic policy and how we how we are going to work with the economic crisis, financial crisis. We have seen that we have more discussions now about the COVID-19 as such. Also in Norway, we have seen that during the last time. For our party, the left party, Socialist Left Party, we have criticized the government. We have said that they have taken too much power during the pandemic. We have laws now which gives the government many possibilities. And since this crisis has been quite long and is still quite long, we think that this should be changed. We should make more decisions in the parliament, not the government as such, but the parliament, so that we have more openness and more discussion about what we are going to do in this situation. That is what we have said. But we have had quite a lot of discussion about how the economic crisis should be handled. We have quite a lot of people who are not working at this time. They have been sent home for a certain time or been laid off. 30,000 people have been laid off for a certain time since the very beginning. And of course, quite a lot of people have been out of work for a certain period and come back and then out of work again. It is typical working class professions, which we have seen this. That there we can see also the highest amount of people who are out of work. For instance, in restaurants, in shops, in the air, in the tourism industry, where we can see that COVID is a disease or rather a crisis, which is a crisis of difference between people, between groups, because those who are on the top of Norwegian society, it is not a problem. On the exchange, everything is going fine, but working people who just work, they have a crisis. They're in a crisis now. And we also see that we have other social costs now. Many young people have not been to school. Many people who are in different social groups, they have also problems. And the cost might be very, very high in the future. We don't know exactly about this now. We have also we have seen a very unusual political cooperation now during the crisis, because the government we have in Norway, the right government, as you know, they have consequently waited and they did not do enough in order to handle the social and economical crisis. And this has meant that the opposition parties, parties who are very, very different actually, they have come together several times in order to make the government do what we think. It has been our party, it has been also the Center Party and the Social Democratic Party and the Progress Party, which is it's a right-hand party. But these four parties have now a majority in the parliament, and we had 2 weeks ago, we come up with quite a lot of suggestions in order to make it easier for the people who are out of work, so that they will get more money and they will get more compensation, etc. And we were able to press that through in Parliament. I think this we have shown that we dare to be pragmatic. and that we dare to have some very unusual alliances, which are important for the people and for the country, and that is the most important now, I think. But of course, still, we do not, we have not agreed on what we should ask the companies to get money from the state to do. We have said that if they get money from the state, they should not give money to those who own the companies. They should not lay people off. Those who own many houses, they should also not demand that much money from people who live in their houses, as they have done before. We have seen that this is now discussed. We see that some companies have got quite a lot of money from the state. They still give money to the owners. Which is of course something we don't think is right. It's because we should have a situation where we should trust one another now in this crisis, and we don't have that. Then, as you said, there will be an election in September in Norway, and we don't know exactly what this should look like, how the campaign before the elections will be. Maybe we will not be able to meet physically, which will also, of course, hamper the campaign a bit. Because usually we talk together when we meet, when we have these election campaigns, and we don't know exactly how this will look. It might be quite different from what we are used to. Especially if people have not been vaccinated when we start the election campaign. If not all the people are vaccinated, if it's the start campaign. We want quite a lot during these elections. Well, we have seen that we are in a very good position. It should be the best election we have had for many, many years, if we should believe what is said now in the opinion polls. And SV, our party, will talk quite a lot about the thing that some people are very rich and some people are very poor in Norway. We will talk about this. We will talk about the climatic crisis, the climate crisis also. And we have also a new situation now when on the center left-hand side in Norway, because the Social Democrats, they have been the largest party in Norway for a long time. Now it is not that anymore, actually. They have a big problem now. It's my dog who is wailing, so I'll just let her in or out. Probably in. So it's not. It's okay for me to have my child. It's nice that you had a dog, because that it makes me also look better. Yes, the children are quite okay, but the dog, well, okay. So it is a new political situation now. It is not quite clear what kind of government we will have after the elections. The Center Party, they have get quite a lot of support now. They are more or less the size of the Social Democratic Party. They say that they want to have a government of two parties, Center Party and Social Democratic. We want a red-green government. And the difference is that if we have just two parties, that will be a center government, which will also work with the right-hand side. But if we will be a very strong party after the elections, it will also, of course, be important for a red-green government in Norway, which will have to lean on the parties on the left-hand side also. We have worked also quite a lot with, of course, with our plan to better the situation in Norway, for instance, with taxes for the people who are poor, new welfare reforms, stop privatization, these questions, to have national control over important resources, to continue to have that. And we have also worked with climate policy, worked quite a lot with that. That's the same as they have done in Denmark and also in other parties. I would like to say that climate is something which is important also for the economic policy, because we have a plan on how to reach the Norwegian climate goals in 2030 with the financing, which is important. We have to have a climate budget for that. And we also have a plan for the industrial policy and economical policy we will need to have in order to change the situation in Norway. As you know, we have had quite a lot of oil industry in our country. We have made a Green Deal now because we have to change from that to have a more green economy with zero emissions. This is, of course, a very important discussions now in Norway, because our economy is very dependent on fossil energy and oil. And that is we have to do this in a fair way also. This will also be something which we will have to talk about in Norway, because many people, they worry about how they can keep their jobs, what will happen to the industry, what will happen to their salaries when we go away from the oil industry and start working in other areas. So in Norway, there's quite a big room for parties that are against working with the climate, saying that we can continue as we work now for many years to come. We have, on the left-hand side, we have to show that we can reach the climatic goals, which also means that people will keep their job. And we think that in this green change, we might have a renaissance for the left economic policy, because the state has to be a leader here. The market cannot do this to change the green economy. The state has to take the leadership here. This means that we will have to steer to start with new green tasks. You talked about windmills in Denmark. We are also talking about hydrogen, bioindustry, and green shipping, which is also something which we are leaders. But again, we will have to do some choices here. We will stop looking for no more oil, and we will try to lead an active policy to have new green parameters. Now, when we have industry which have tasks, this is the best we can do, both for reducing the emissions, but also for reducing unemployment. So this will be a very central task for us also during the election campaign. And I think will our parties, which are not only green parties, we are very important, because we have to work at the green policy, yes, but this green policy will have to show how to reach the climatic goals, but do this in order not to make the people on the top of society get away with a high profit. We will have to work with those who have a diesel car, for instance. We will have to show them that we can have a climate change for the ordinary people as well, also for those who have an ordinary car, and to take care of the jobs for them. And I think that this is possible only for parties on the left-hand side. We will have to work together with the Social Democratic Party, and also with the Green parties. Thank you very much.
Yes, certainly. I'll try to reply. In Sweden, during the crisis, there's been enormous appreciation and encouragement for the people who work in elderly care. They've received massive support. People have taken food to their workplaces, for example. They've really received a lot of appreciation. And people also have realized what, for example, school means to them, what nursery means to them, and healthcare. And the Prime Minister has also recently admitted that we've had problems in the elderly care for many, many years, and we've appointed committees that have looked into what happened during the crisis in the elderly care sector, and they've been very, very critical, saying that it's been underfunded for decades. When we entered 2020, we were facing cost-cutting exercises everywhere, local, regional, government level. That's how we started 2020. But what we've seen now is that, we managed to force through aid packages. We managed to force through 7.2 billion of additional funding for care. But during the crisis, the government has really injected a lot of money into the economy. But we're talking about structural long-term issues with underfunding. And in Sweden, certainly, I mean, we see that we have a lot of private companies in the elderly care sector, and so what we've seen is that you don't want to be injecting public funding into somebody's private for-profit company, and that is a real scourge in Sweden. We have such high levels of privatization with precarious employment. It means that when you look at private versus public funded activities and privately funded activities, you see care workers with lower educations, more precarious unemployment, fixed term employment, part-time employment, because that's how they operate. That's how they make a profit. So what we've seen during the pandemic in Sweden, is a result of something that we've said for many, many years, that we need more resources funneled towards the care sector in general. And now it's just been so incredibly visible. Nobody can deny that. It's a reality. Now, what will the result be of that? I don't know. We'll see. I think that we will certainly see a major impact of that. Of course, we'll have political debate. Some people want to talk about crime and punishment above all else, always, and some people will always be pointing their fingers at migration, etc. But we've certainly seen the ugly underbelly of welfare society. And I think a lot of people want to do something about it. And we're still in the middle of the crisis, of course. And in the middle of the crisis, the social Democrats have pushed through a new social liberalization of the job centers, for job seekers in the middle of this crisis. Now we still have job centers left in 88 municipalities, and we're seeing rampant unemployment. And in the middle of that, they still want to push through a neoliberal experiment. Again, yet another one in the middle of the worst unemployment crisis in decades. And then, of course, also they're shaping these job centers so that most resources will be allocated to the people who already have most resources and probably need them less. That's how they're setting the whole system up. As that's one issue. And another issue, of course, the hospital sector, we have too few beds. Simply, that's another crisis that has come to light. Thank you. I'll continue in Danish. Maybe I'll speak a bit more slowly. I know that we're a bit of an outlier among the Nordic languages, so I'll try to lower the speed. Now, in this discussion about the welfare state and the Nordic welfare model, well, we can certainly say that in Denmark, the model has become more popular. We have a right wing that's very hard pressed at the moment, as Carsten said. The old sort of agrarian parties falling apart and it's doing very poorly in the poll. The Social Democrats right now are scoring 33% in the polls, a third of all votes. And this is linked to the economic policy. And we find it difficult to criticize this government. They're investing in welfare. They're not cutting costs, and that's very, very popular at the moment. So what's the right wing going to do? Going to go out and say they should cut costs on welfare services at present? It's very hard to sell that to the public right now. And I think this is an opportunity we should seize on the left. We shouldn't just be satisfied to see a little bit more investment. No, I think it's crucial that we now say that we can use this to take privatized services back, bring them back into the public fold. I think we need to municipalize. We need to make certain services state services again. I mean, 5 years ago or so, Denmark sold off Denmark's vaccine production, which used to be state-owned, and they did so very cheaply. And now it's in the hands of a Saudi Arabian oil tycoon, which is slightly unfortunate, isn't it? But it's one of the hubs that can produce the Pfizer vaccine. And I think that we should really try to harness this enormous support we're seeing for the welfare state at present. You know, what we can gain from bringing things back into public ownership. We need to take back public ownership. And, you know, I think we also need to focus on getting a left-wing majority so that we don't always have to play ball with the right, you know, and yield to their demands. So I think, you know, we need to look for inspiration. What measures can we now suggest that will expand our welfare state? But this is a historical opportunity to expand the welfare state, the welfare model, because the crisis really demonstrates what you can do in a welfare society. And couldn't we have done even more if we had an even broader welfare society? I think that has become abundantly obvious. Karsten, go ahead. Yes, that's quite right, Audun. The crises that we're facing now, for example, the major health crisis with COVID, the climate crisis, environment crisis, nature crisis, as I call it, these types of crises are crises that are within our remit because they demonstrate that what you need is to stand together. You need communal solutions, shared solutions, and you know they really play to our strengths. And we need to strike the right balance between having an ambitious climate policy that has to be coupled with a very strong social policy as well, because unless you have that, consider those social aspects, then you know you will see the same problems that you're seeing in Germany and France at present with implementing climate policies. We need reform, but we need sustainable reform, socially sustainable reform. And I would like to say that the COVID crisis in Denmark has, amongst other things, highlighted the importance of unionism. In Denmark, we have seen a series of agreements brokered with the state, private employers, and trade unions. So those agreements, those solutions also make abundantly clear to everyone how important the trade unions are. We have a historical tradition for very high levels of organization, and this includes within the public sector, because all soldiers in Denmark are unionized, all medical consultants, whole police force, everybody is unionized. But we've seen organization levels amongst those with shorter educations fall. And I think that this COVID crisis can really demonstrate how important it is that we have an organized labor movement as a partner if we are to get everyone through this crisis together. And we need to think of that. How do we solve the health crisis? We have to look at how we tackle the climate crisis, but we also very practically need to think through how we strengthen and take on board the trade union movement in all of that. And I think we can all use faith in our economically credible policies, because we have credibility, both economic and social credibility.
I think that as in Norway, one of the consequences of the COVID is that one of the parties of the government, the Conservative Party, has gotten more support now. And one reason is that you can say that the opposition has, when we have worked with economic policy, we have made the everyday life better for people, but we can always also made the government look better than it is, because it's difficult for people to understand where decisions are being made. This has been necessary to do this now, but well, I think that we in Norway, we have seen for many years now, it is more and more difficult for the right-hand side to work out a private policy privatization, because the welfare state is so strong in Norway. So now they're doing a quasi privatization. They're trying to do that at least. They open up for more profit in the welfare sector, which is a very strange type of privatization, where the state takes the risk and they pay everything, but the private companies can take the profit. So private capitalism should of course be that the capitalists should get something back for the risk they take. That is the reason why they should be able to make a profit. But this is not the case now, because these welfare services in Norway, they are run by the state, they are financed by the state. It doesn't, the private profit doesn't give a meaning. It's very easy money for the capitalists. And we have not in Norway done as they have done in Sweden. And I think that hopefully, for us at least, that many people in Norway, they think that they think about they do not want to come into that situation which they have in Sweden, where privatization is done at a very large scale. But we can see that in many sectors in Norway as well, for instance, kindergartens, and also for taking care of the older people, we have seen that privatization is now coming. Here as well, we saw that people who got money from the state to build kindergarten ended up in buying large houses in Spain for the owners. For instance, Australian companies who have bought plots in Norway to build kindergartens, hedge funds. We're also working in this sector, etc., etc. So we have as a very central goal to stop all this if we get a majority after the elections. And we use what we're seeing in Sweden very actively. We tell the people in Norway that we should stop this now, so that we will not end up in a situation which they have in Sweden, because in Sweden, the right-hand side made it much easier for private companies to make profit here. So for us, it's very central, if there will be another government after the elections, is to introduce a special situation where the companies cannot take out profit from the welfare sector at all. One thing is the support for the welfare state, but of course, it is also we also have to talk about the will to finance the welfare state. So the strong welfare state and policy for making people make money is difficult here, because we see that there is a difference between us and the Social Democratic Party. If we want new reforms in the welfare sector, if we want to strengthen the municipalities, then of course we will have to make more money go to the state. But we are there now in Norway that SV, our party, we are trying to make a new tax policy which will make it possible to work more in the welfare sector. This is something we would like to have, and not all the other parties. Thank you. I would like to say that beware, do not do like we did in Sweden. Do not privatize it the same way we did, and do not use taxpayers' money for that. What we pay for the care of our children or our grandmother, quite a lot of that money goes to profit for those who own these homes. We do not recommend this. I would also like to say very shortly, when it comes to taxes and Audun, in Sweden, the tax system is not very good, actually. It is much worse than in Great Britain and the US even. So when it comes, if we want to repair the society and also to broaden the welfare society, then the big question will be in Sweden around taxes. There is no political interest to heighten the taxes in Sweden. We have lowered the taxes now for several years, and of course, still the political parties. There are still parties who mean that we should lower the taxes again to solve this or that. So I mean, even the climate question should be solved when with lowering the taxes. So this is the political line we have. Not even the social democrats would like to increase the taxes actually, so that people will be on a more even level. So this is very tough and very difficult, and I think that the big problem is they are there in order to finance the welfare. They say many nice words, of course, but when it comes to prioritize, it's something else. It's something else. And of course, again, one talk about lowering the taxes, and then they have a small sum, a symbolical sum to show that they do something in the welfare sector. But still, they want to lower the taxes. Many of the parties in the country. I think there are many things we should fight for, or rather against, in Sweden. And I think that there are more and more people who understand that we need to heighten the taxes. Our line is that we should start with those who make the most in the country, those who are very rich in the company. They should pay more in order to have a better welfare system, both for the old people, for children, etc., etc., so that the quality will be better also in the schools and also in the welfare. So we fight, but this is not that easy. Thank you. Yes, I think that in many places you depend on the political situation in each country, and we have to start when you talk about broadening the welfare state. But to start to talk about this, to talk about broadening this, not just stopping the cutting, is something new. At least in Denmark, we have never before, at least for many years, been in a situation where we do not cut in the welfare. This is a new situation, and the welfare state is very popular. And this means that we can think about where we should broaden it. I think that we should be careful here. We should not think about the old left way of thinking with party programs to talk about the production means of production. We can also do that, of course, but we should talk with something which is much closer to people. What we are talking about in our party is, for instance, vaccines and production of vaccines, because this is something people know about now and understand. Why is it Pfizer and large companies, why do they make so much money on this? Why do we not produce our own vaccines in the country so that we can also export this to other countries? Because the Nordic countries, even though we will be vaccinated by the end of this year at least, we are not safe because there might be mutations from other countries which our vaccines will not be effective against. So, for instance, from the third world, these can be resistant against the vaccines we have now. So we have a global responsibility. This is where our welfare model is something, and we can talk about this. We can also talk about people's everyday life. For instance, in Sweden and Norway, with dentists. In Denmark, they are privatized 100% for some reason. This means then that the inequality is shown in the teeth of the people. So we can talk about pressuring here, so that this will also be a part of the state system, of the welfare state. And of course, we have had very great success about this. We talked about profit in the welfare sector. We talked about this, and that has been a success, but we will go further also. I think that we are in a situation now when we can allow ourselves to do this. We have quite a lot of backing here, and no other people will do, no other parties will do this, because if you look at the Danish government now, it might be the best one in the whole of Europe when it comes to economic policy and when they were in the way they've handled the corona crisis. But this does not mean that they are making the British people pay more taxes. No, we use the money we had before on welfare, yes, but we will not do, they will not do anything about the inequalities in society. And but I think that we should, from a left party perspective, we should do as much as we can to work with this, so that the people who are richest in the country will pay more taxes. This is also important for people's everyday life. Thank you. I would like to thank you for a good discussion. I quite agree with the panel. It is important to be concrete. It's also important to see how the countries can inspire one another, because we've had a long tradition and a long trend with cutting in the welfare state, with tax reductions, but now things are changing. So I think that we are in the Nordic countries, we are very close to one another. And if we can do something in one country, this might mean that we can do something in another country as well. I agree with Pernille, we have to be very concrete. We have, for instance, talked about two possibilities to better the Norwegian welfare state if we get power after the elections. We have something called the school free time system, which means that the smallest kids in the school, they can be there after they finish school till the parents come back from work. It's quite expensive in Norway. We will like for this to be free of charge. Now we have to pay. Then again, we have the system with the dentistry in Norway, which is a large hole in the in the welfare state, because it might cost thousands and thousands of kroner to do something with your teeth. This is something which is also important for us. I agree. Then the pandemic has shown possibilities for concrete cooperation in the Nordic countries, because we were not ready when the pandemic came to us. We were not ready, so that we would like to have common depositions of storages of medical supplies in the countries. And here I think that all the countries in the Nordic region could work together, because we didn't have that in the beginning. We also like to have a state medical company in Norway to produce much more medicine, a state company, and this will of course also be something we could do together with the other Nordic countries. I think the situation we are in now, with the closed borders, I think that this makes people sit up and think, how bad is it that the borders are closed now, because there are so many things connecting us, especially between Norway and Sweden, and also the Norway and Finland in the north. And there are many problems now. It is, for us, it is something very strange that these borders are closed. We have lived together for many years, and we have not even thought about the border. So for me, the situation is with these closed borders between Norway, Sweden, and Norway, Finland, is a very bad situation. It is very important for us as a common goal not to get back to this ever. And of course, we have to discuss how this should be done, of course, yes. But this is something, it should be a good argument for better cooperation between the Nordic countries also when it comes to being prepared for such pandemics.
Well, you could always use Sweden as to scare people out of privatization. Sadly, that's that of course is where we're at. But yes, we certainly need to make sure that we become more equal after this crisis, and we need to expand elderly care and health care as well, because we've also seen women adversely affected during this crisis. The burden of care disproportionately falls on women's shoulders, and so we need to expand those care offers so that women can fully participate on equal footing in the labour market. And so welfare, of course, also is there in order to make sure that women are available on the labour market at all, even for the private sector. And I think we can see a lot of great examples from our fellow Nordic countries, and draw excellent examples from our Nordic cooperation. You know, we have drawn a lot of lessons from Norway's work to, for example, bolster rural areas. And those are models that we can implement and adopt in Sweden. And of course, this also is relevant during this crisis, because in Sweden it's much harder to hire qualified people for all sorts of public services. So that is something we do need to also look at. And we need to look at both welfare and climate policies, and we need to work together so that we can stand stronger and have more cooperation, as somebody mentioned, on medicines, but also about food supplies, for example, and other types of cooperation, for example, on vaccinations. And I think we as socialists, red, green parties should work together, because that's what we believe in: cooperation, solidarity. It'll only make us better to work together. So thank you all for your contributions today. Thank you.